It's a great day. My name is Shay Brown, the Happy Entrepreneur, and welcome to the Happy Entrepreneur Show, the number one business development and revenue focused late night show in the country where we're on a mission. And our mission really is to inspire, our mission is to empower, and our mission is to provide you, that's right, you, the entrepreneur, with all of the resources that are necessary to execute that big vision you have for the people you were called to serve. And on this particular episode, we have the one and only Erin, who's in the building. And she's saying your work ethic, I know y'all reading it right below, your work ethic is the problem, not the solution. Sounds like an oxymoron, but we'll find out what's going on. What's happening, Erin? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so great. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Well, welcome to the Happy Entrepreneur Show. It's an honor and a privilege to have you. Folks are reading your bio, I'm sure. They're looking at the topic. Your work ethic is the problem, not the solution. Take a moment if you can and just tell us why you selected this topic and what can folks even expect. I mean, is this only for folks who are not working hard enough? Is this for folks who are ready to get to another level? Talk to us for a minute if you would.
It's actually for people that are working too hard. So the challenge is with most entrepreneurs is that when we start out, we work super hard when you're first launching a business. And it's all about the hustle culture and how much can you put in and how many hours and how much work ethic can you put in. And that will lead you to a certain level of success. But what happens is you become so integral into all the different pieces of the business that you actually become the bottleneck that prevents the business from growing. And so that work ethic that people are so committed to, and as entrepreneurs, I think is just ingrained in the nature of who we are and getting out there and putting the work in, it eventually becomes actually what prevents you from growing because you are the bottleneck preventing everything else because everything has to come through you and you've got your finger in the dike holding all the problems in, and that work ethic becomes the problem instead of the solution.
So what do you say to the entrepreneurs out there? It's like, well, wait a minute. Does she not understand that I am the chief sales officer and I'm wearing this hat called chief marketing officer? Does she not understand I'm wearing this hat called chief automation officer? Does she maybe not? She has to make sure she's aware that I'm also the chief operation officer. From time to time, I even do the admin. She'll be surprised. No, I do bookkeeping, by the way, and I do a lot of other things. I take care of my family. So my work ethic is needed right now to keep the business afloat. Before you get into how famous she is and who she is and all of that, Shay, what would you say to the person like myself that's watching and listening now?
Yeah, so I totally understand that you are the chief everything officer, right? You're doing the marketing and the sales, and you are sending out the emails and doing the invoicing and doing all of the things. And when you first start out in business, that's probably what you need to do is to be doing all of those things. But what I've seen after working with hundreds of different businesses is that as you grow, you keep hold of some of these hats that really you need to take that hat off and pass it on to the next person. But because there's problems, or maybe we haven't taken the time to really perfect the system or to document the system so that it can be effectively passed on, we end up holding to remnants of those hats. And because we are still holding on to things or pieces of things, it prevents us from being able to grow. Because you're right, entrepreneurs are doing 5 million things and wearing 5 million hats, and we can't take on anymore, right? And so that when we say, hey, you got to work less, you're like, listen, I can't work less. I've got all of these things on my plate. But the real problem is you got to start figuring out how to get that stuff off your plate so that you can spend your time doing the things that actually help the business to grow, and that you can start focusing on those things that really matter in that business growth and let go of some of those pieces that you should have let go of, but you just keep doing because your work ethic is so awesome.
Well, as you're talking, we're all looking behind your desk, and we see that big old sign that says "Business Made Simple." By the way, we're going to get to that in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. But there's another group of folks out there. It's like, okay, Shay, makes sense, and sense what she's saying. I'm now building a team. I've got some 1099s that work for me. I've got some folks that are full time. That's kind of cool. What would you say to me in terms of what are some of her best practices or principles in terms of hiring people or trying to attract the right people so it can free my time up? Because I've got to find the right talent that can step in. Got the cash flow, get that. I do want to do work less. So here's the question so we're clear is, do you have any suggestions, best practices or principles as it relates to bringing folks into the company so they can fulfill the role at the highest level that the CEO or entrepreneur kind of expects. Because you typically hear, Shay, they don't do it like me.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And so the first piece of that is to put together a strategy. I think what happens too often in business is that we wait too long to hire. So we wait until, you know what, if I don't get someone in the door tomorrow, I'm going to lose my mind, right? I've got so much stuff on my plate. So really, you should have an org chart built out. And we like to actually use an accountability chart. So you're thinking about who do you need on your team, not people, but not their names, but the roles of who you need. So that bookkeeper, that marketing manager, that virtual assistant. Start thinking about all the roles that you are currently filling and what those roles would actually do. And then it becomes really obvious to say, you know what? I am doing all of this admin work that I really should pass off because I can hire somebody else to do this at $15 an hour. And meanwhile, it's taken up all of my time. So the first step is to build that strategy of a future accountability chart and think about, you know what? If I want to grow this business, if I want to 3X in the next 2 years, which is a common goal that a lot of people have, what team do you need to support that growth? And start building for that and planning for that. Because when you go to hire, you want to have a plan in place. So have that vision of who you want to hire first, and then be thinking about what am I hiring somebody to do, and then start documenting the processes that person would of how to actually do the work that you're going to hire them to do. Then when it's time to actually make that hire, you've got the job description ready, you've got the full training for them built out, and they can walk into a role and actually step into success instead of stepping into the mess that you're just trying to throw things at them. Hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. I need you to take stuff off my plate, but there's no real structure around it. And that makes it really hard to have a successful hire. And that's why a lot of people end up in that space of, look, I can't hire anybody else to do this stuff because I'm the only one that can do it right. But that's just because you haven't built the system of success for somebody else to be able to follow it.
How did you feel when you would first turn over the reins to other folks to step in and do things that you used to do? I know for myself, it was, we're talking to other folks out there that you're going to be doing this. Okay. I know some of you've already done this. Just hold for a second. Don't worry. I'm going to come back. We're going to find out who this Erin person is that's doing all this talking. But I know a group of you are like maybe where I was once upon a time, which was, man, I wasn't nervous, and I didn't quite micromanage. But I'm going to tell you, I had some sleepless nights because I'm like, they're working on it. Got to have space, got to step away. And I was just a nervous wreck. And so what's maybe a mindset, maybe some thoughts you can give to the person that has to turn it over to the person they've now hired. So they've taken the step and they're doing it. But let me tell you, I wish I had someone like you around that could help me because I was still mentally stuck to what was going on, although I wasn't doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does take some practice to free up that brain space. The best tool that you have for that is to have a well-documented system. So one thing that happens a lot with us as entrepreneurs when we're getting ready to start delegating something is that we've been doing it 100 different ways on the fly and figuring out the best way to do it for this case or the best way to do it for this case as we're going. And so it's nerve-wracking to pass it off to somebody and say, but what if this instance comes up? Or I don't know, is that the way I do it every time? Maybe we're not even aware of how we've been doing this best practice. So take the time to think through what is the best practice for this and then build that training module out and then pass it off to somebody. Now you are going to have to, of course, monitor, right? And do those quality assurance checks as you go and help to redirect. And I would also encourage you to get feedback from whoever you're hiring. Hey, does this process make sense? Do you see other ways to improve the process? What holes have you run into in understanding how to do the process? Or do you have ideas on how to make it more efficient? You can get some of that feedback from the new hire. So you're not just throwing the process at them and then walking away, but it is important to have it well documented and then back off, let them run the process, but keep doing those quality assurance checks.
Good words. Good words. So tell us a little about who is Erin? You're sitting here and you're sharing some, wisdom, but folks want to know your backstory. So it's a two-part question. What's your backstory that led you to doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I am a serial entrepreneur. My first company I started, I thought, you know what? I had an education background and I thought, I want to do something. I want to have a piece of something of my own. So I built a tutoring company and I did all the things. Let me tell you, I built my first website and it was so hideous. I learned how to do QuickBooks. I was doing all of the marketing. I was doing all of the onboarding. I was even doing the tutoring for kids. I was doing all the things, which was fine until I got to be successful, right? And then I ended up in that space that a lot of people end up in. A lot of your audience is probably in the same space saying, listen, I can't grow anymore. I can't do anymore and still keep doing it all on my own. So I did the same thing that a lot of you guys did. Hey, I'm going to hire, and it didn't work out. And I hired someone else and that didn't work out. And I thought, maybe the problem is me. And so I really dove in deep and invested years into figuring out systems. And I learned this is my jam. This is how my brain works. I am a systems girl. So I love thinking in systems. So I took that business and I systemized everything in the business. I got it documented. I figured out how to do it. And I eventually grew that company to where I had 23 employees and I was down to working 2 to 3 hours a week. And I thought, this is awesome, but I don't have anything left to systemize. So I sold that company and started Business Made Simple over 10 years ago. And I love it because I get to see the back end of hundreds and hundreds of different businesses. And I get to geek out on all of those systems and help to support other business owners to be able to step away from the business. And I think that's the goal really is eventually we all have to have an exit plan from the business, whether it's exiting from being the one who's doing it all to actually exiting and selling. Either way, we have to be able to say, how do I transition out of this phase of doing it all to having a business that is independent of me as the owner? And that is my passion. And what I love helping businesses do is to learn how to grow a business that's independent of the owner.
Independent of the owner. Wow, that sounds amazing. So you gave us a snapshot on Business Made Simple, but it hangs over right there behind you. Is that there as a reminder? I mean, why is it there?
Yeah, well, I just love it. It makes a good backdrop, but also it's a good reminder that business
Forever
can be
marketing,
simple.
right? Just forever marketing, Shay. What do you mean?
Right.
Why is it
That's
there?
right.
Hello.
Now, I think it is a good reminder that sometimes we get stuck in this idea that, well, what I do is so complex, nobody else can do it. You know, my role is so complex that nobody else could do it. But really, business is meant to be a place that runs simply. It's meant to be a spot where, listen, I develop processes and I develop methods and opportunities, and then I teach other people how to run them. That's what Business Made Simple is this ability to say, you know what, I'm going to continue to grow the business in a way that doesn't overcomplicate my life.
Yeah, and I like the word simple because when you hear you got to put a system in place, it feels like for me, it used to feel like I'm putting myself in a box. I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't understand. My business is different. No, I'm in the self-education industry, but it's still different. And yet you have this philosophy as a I guess you call it a fractional CEO or fractional OO. You have this philosophy that you can systematize whatever you're doing. Can you give us maybe an example? I don't have to give us a name or anything of a client that had a challenge and how you was able to put a system in. What does a system mean? Was it a system for hiring? Was it a system for bringing in new clients? Was it a system for onboarding? I know there's many different systems, but if you can give us an example of one, and the reason I want you to do this is that if you're like Shay Brown, you probably need all of them, okay? But I want you to listen because I believe her thought process is the same no matter what the problem or system she's putting in place. So take a moment and just give us an example of what it would look like for an entrepreneur that's out there today. And I know it's a loaded question, but frame it the best you can so the audience gets a sense of, this is possible.
Yeah, so I was working with a client last week and they create the most amazing custom storybooks that are 700 pages of family history and all of these stories of generations of ancestors, and they're doing research and contextual things and gathering pictures and sorting people through people's boxes. And they wear this badge of honor of everything we do is custom. Everything we do is bespoke. We can't systemize it because everything is custom. And so we talked to them and we're like, look, it's great that you're creating these custom books and this custom experience, and they are incredible. But you are going through the same process every time. You're just not recognizing that it's the same process. So we help them to sit back and say, okay, let's look at your sales process. What happens when they first call in? And then we start making these process maps, right? Of, okay, so they have this problem. Okay, then what do you do? What if it's this problem? What do you do? And we start breaking down what is the train that people are going through to be able to deliver this awesome book. And then we start saying, listen, there's different phases, and the communication within those phases is the same. And the way that you are tracking, the billing for those projects is the same. and the way that you are, sorting through their materials has some variation in it, but you can systemize a lot of those different variations. And so even when we're in the spot thinking everything I do is so custom and there's nobody else that does what I do, you do have a system that you are following, or you would have lost your mind long ago, trying to keep a business going and reinventing the wheel every single day. You do have a system that you're following. And so one thing that we help you identify is, let's get all that out of your head. As the business owner, it's in there and you just need somebody to translate it for somebody else. So we start extracting at it and then looking at the system and saying, where's the pain in this system? Where does it fall apart? Where are people frustrated? Your employees, or where are you frustrated? And identifying, okay, this part is broken. Let's fix it. Let's figure out some ideas for where to fix it. And, I would say a lot of times when business owners see the whole thing, mapped out and they're looking at the process, they're going, wow, that is what I do. And that is kind of simple when you map it out like that. And I can see what the problems are. And I already have ideas for how to fix them. But it's taking it out and putting a mirror up to your process to say, this is what you are. Let's look at how we can grow it by either duplicating it or fixing it, or a combination of both of those things. And so at the end of this conversation, he said, wow, we've spent a day together and you just made me 100 times what I paid you in the sales process alone, by identifying here's what the process is and where you can fix it. And it, without changing and revolutionizing everything you do, some small tweaks that have revolutionized the business. So, to bring in 100 times what we paid them and gross, double, triple their revenue, is amazing to me. I'm so passionate about it because we do have systems. They're in there. You just got to be able to get it out of your head and put it on something where you can look at it and evaluate.
I love that, man. That is like spot on. And as you were speaking there, it led me to a segment we have here at the Happy Entrepreneur Show called "Today is my January 1st." Now, for those folks that are tuning in for the very first time, we'll talk about today is my January 1st. But for those folks who tune in every single week and you're here every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can go ahead and say those magical words. Today is my January 1st. For those folks, this is your first time. Today is my January 1st is one of our personal mantras as a Happy Entrepreneur Show. It represents a fresh start. It represents a do-over. It means our past and our future, no matter what's happened, no longer equals the future. So my question we're going to find out from Erin in a moment is, what was her January 1st moment? What was a time that she had a setback in her business? Maybe it was all perfect. She's always had systems in place. She has the husband now. She has the 3 kids now. She has the life now. She's selling her business now. Like life is just great. We'll find a time maybe that there was a setback. Things weren't the way she wanted to. And how does she bounce back to it? So my question to you on the other side, Erin, is number one, when you hear those words, today is my January 1st, what do you hear? And number two, what was one of the setbacks you had in your life that you had to bounce back from?
Yeah, I love that statement. Today is my January 1st. I think sometimes in your life, somebody speaks a phrase to you that sticks with you forever and resonates with you. I remember one time in college, I was going through a particularly hard time and I was just crashing and burning. I just was so burned out. And a good friend of mine said, but the beauty of you is that you have the ability to rise from the ashes and recreate yourself. And so that's what that phrase to me, that you are this is your January 1st. It doesn't matter what you are. You get to rebirth yourself and decide who you want to be in the future. So I love that statement. For me, I think when I first came into business, when I started my first tutoring company, I have an experience of growing up in a family of entrepreneurs. My parents are both entrepreneurs. My grandparents were both entrepreneurs. It keeps going back in generations. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. We never really talked about it as entrepreneurship. It was more of like, dad has a construction company. And we didn't talk about it in terms of business. But when I was a kid, my dad lost his construction company. And through no fault of his own, it was a thing that happened in the market, and he lost this construction company. And my family spent a summer living in a tent. I mean, it was rough. And so in starting this business, my first business, I thought, man, the real risk of entrepreneurship is, what if the business doesn't work out and I lose that income? But what I've come to realize is that while that is a risk, you can always build something new. You can always go get a different job. You can always figure out a different path, just as my parents did, and are very successful today. But the real risk of entrepreneurship that I think applies to everybody is that if you're successful, it will take over your life. Or if you're not successful, there's this risk always that business can take over your life. And you have to be able to keep that in check. And so for me, that January 1st moment was I was running that tutoring company. I was doing all of the things, right? And then my oldest son was diagnosed with autism. And I thought, what am I supposed to do? I've got 3 boys. The oldest one has special needs. I I am here trying to do all the mom things and I'm doing all of the different business things. And I don't want to give that up because I've grown something. It's like a piece of me that can exist outside of my family. And I love that. But how do I fit all of this in and carry this new challenge of working with, having a child with autism? And I thought, I have got to recreate how this thing works. I have got to figure out how to make this business and my life fit together because I love both of them. And that was the big moment for me where I thought, this is my chance to recreate myself from the ashes and figure it out and build something that works for everybody. And
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being so authentic. I appreciate that. And one of my favorite questions to ask almost on every episode is, what's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given? And for the audience, we'll frame it for them that you've had many mentors, you've read so many books, you had a lot of training and all that cool stuff. But if you had to reach out and say, man, here's one idea that I learned from one of my mentors that hold near and dear to me that you can pass on to us, what would it be? And you as an audience, you at home, you get to kind of lean in. She said a whole lot, and everything she talked about is very spot on. It was very important. But now you get to take away an idea. You may never meet her mentor that you can use for the rest of your life. So here's the question. What's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given?
yeah, I think may sound like anti-advice, something you might not like, but it resonates with me. So hold on before you judge my advice here. But one of the best pieces of advice I had, I was going in and talking to a mentor of mine, and I said, listen, I cannot do all of these things. Like I cannot keep all of these balls up in the air and still be successful. And as like a recovering perfectionist, that is rough for me, right? I want to be able to have all those pieces running and working together. And I thought, I cannot be doing all of these things and I can't trust anybody else to do it. And how do I hold all these pieces? And my mentor looked at me dead faced and he says, Erin, you are not that good. You are not that special. And I was like, what? And then I thought about it and I was like, you know what? You're right. I do not have to hold myself to this level of thinking that I am the only one that can do it, that I am the only one that can make the impact. I'm the only one that can do all of the things. And it gave me breathing room to realize I can trust other people to come in and support me in these roles in my life. And I can leave room to be able to say, maybe there's a better way than what I'm doing right now. And so that is some of the best advice I've ever gotten, is actually someone looking at me and telling me, you are not that good and you are not that special.
How did you feel at the time? I mean, I hear those words. I have a certain feeling. Do you recall any feelings that was going through your mind? Like, what were you thinking when you first heard it? Because you're reflecting back now, obviously, but how were you feeling in that moment?
I think because of the person, because I know them and I had that relationship with them, I felt relief. Like, oh, thank you. I can take off this superwoman cape. I don't have to wear that and pretend to be that. I can be authentic in who I am and recognize I have strengths and weaknesses, and other people can fill in those different holes. And so for me, I think just based on the love of this mentor, it was easy to see his intentions. And I felt that relief of, oh, I can take off that image. I can take off that title and find some help.
Nice. As we come down the home stretch, there's a 2-part question. Number one, what type of clients are you looking to work with these days, if any? And number 2, how can folks best connect with you over and beyond this conversation?
Yeah, great. So we love to work with businesses that are in growth patterns, so that are either looking to scale their team, are looking to open new locations, and want to make sure that things are nice and systemized so that they can grow without compromising their quality. So that's who we love to work with. And as far as how people can reach out to me, I would love to connect on Instagram. And our Instagram handle is Make Business Simple. And I'd love to be able to connect there. We share a lot of awesome tips and some fun stories of what it looks like to systemize. If you're in that space of figuring out how to grow and how to systemize, we'd love to be able to connect with you there.
Fantastic. Well, let me say, first of all, thank you so much for being on the Happy Entrepreneur Show. Shout out to you and to Amy Walker, who's just an amazing individual, by the way, for connecting us together. So thanks for being on the Happy Entrepreneur Show. We can't wait to have you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you. Thank you to viewers. Thank you for tuning in. I never get tired every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Never, ever, 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 ever get tired. Remind that you're amazing, that you're awesome, that you're already, I know it sounds so hokey dokey, smoky pokey, but you are an incredible human being. And as you're watching this right now, today, in fact, is your January 1st. And because of just that one reason alone, I believe your best is still yet to come. Your best is yet to come. Your better days are ahead of you. With that being said, my name hasn't changed. It's still the same. Shay Brown, the Happy Entrepreneur. Make it a great day, everyone. And I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, we'll make some good things happen. We connect again next time. God bless, and we wish you success. Peace, Erin. We out.